recording. Good afternoon and welcome to today's nonprofit webinar, Exploring Nonprofit Structures. I'm Dora Wong, a board member of Nonprofit Net. We're an all-volunteer run nonprofit organization whose mission is to advance Greater Boston small nonprofits. We do this through free expert-led management seminars like this one, leadership acceleration program, and networking forums. If you benefit from today's program, there are 3 ways you can help us. We'd appreciate your feedback because it helps us plan future programs, and it's important feedback for our speakers. Second, help keep our webinars free of charge. We depend on your financial support. If you're able to, support us with a suggested donation of $10 to $20 or more. We'll be sending you links to our donation page through our Zoom chat. Third, help us spread the word about Nonprofit Net through your network. Forward our emails, like and share our posts on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Just a few housekeeping details. Feel free to use our chat to ask questions. I'll be monitoring that. If there's anything you need to raise your hand or react, please do so. A recording of this program will be available on our website, nonprofitnet.org. And with that, I'm excited to welcome Kim McCormick, President of McCormick Consulting.
All right. Ready for me, Dora?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Nice to see the remarks on the chat. Welcome, welcome. I'm looking at some familiar faces and names. So hi, if I've had the pleasure of meeting you. If I haven't, happy to connect and use this opportunity to connect with everybody. As Dora said, and I really appreciate, Dora, you reaching out. I think we had a friend in common, Kathy Lee, who actually put us in touch together, and I'm really happy to be doing this today. I actually live in Lexington, Mass, so Dora and I strangely are in the same town, which I can't believe we hadn't run into each other before now, but nonetheless, here we are, and happy to be sharing with everybody. I think everyone's from Massachusetts today, yeah? Yeah, I'm seeing some nods and stuff. It looks pretty local. So I have some remarks and some slides to share, and we are going to then have questions. So if you have questions, definitely put them in the chat. As Dora said, she can do that, and I can stop and answer questions, or we can hold to the end. I kind of prefer the end thing, but I don't, if you've got something burning, then let's definitely open it up and have a conversation, and we can go ahead and do it that way. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right. Let me do this the right way. Okay. Share that screen. All right. Does someone see a purple slide that says managing to achieve? Can I get it? Okay. Thank you, Marty. Appreciate that. All right. And I can't see everyone on the little box screen, so I apologize if you're trying to say something or notice. Maybe Dora can check it out. But anyways, all right, let's get started. So I can do this the right way. Here we go. Okay, so let's get started with this. Did anyone see Succession? Does anyone recognize this photo? This is from the show Succession. I'm seeing a few nod heads and some smiles. That's great. If you didn't, it's okay. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background. I know that it's been off the air for a little while, but nonetheless, this sort of just made sense for this moment in time. So if you haven't had the pleasure of watching Succession, you either love it or you hate it. So take that for what it is. But if you need a recommendation, I suggest checking it out a little bit. It really is a fictional story of a multi-million-dollar media conglomerate that was founded by Father Roy. He's in the middle. And you can see in this picture that he's flanked by his 4 children, a son-in-law, and a nephew. And most of them are vying for the role of CEO. This show features this intense and some downright nasty competition between the siblings, and also between the siblings and the current C-suite of the organization. The lengths that these fictional characters go to compete in these settings is truly Hollywood outrageous. Although some of my friends who work in similar companies are like, it's so close to reality, I can't even watch this show. But nonetheless, here we are. The culture really is win at all costs. And what happens over and over again is that the business is negatively affected by the actions taken for an individual to rise to power. Similarly, actually, there's a true story featured in Forbes magazine of a senior executive, this is true, who wrote about her experience of when her CEO at the time hired two people to do the same job and didn't tell them. His intention was to decide which one was best and fire the other one. But as documented by the person who lived and then wrote about this story, it created a culture of backstabbing, infighting, and resource hoarding. Nobody trusted each other. So I share these two stories because in one aspect, they provide insights about the nonprofit landscape today, right? I mean, minus the vitriol and mostly the nasty stuff, nonprofits exist in what we track as 17 different sectors where the business is the same or similar. We vie for the same staff, the same donors, the same partners, and sometimes the exact same mission impact. And what is done over the past 368 years since the oldest charitable organization in the Western Hemisphere, does anyone know what it is? The oldest one ever? It's actually here in Massachusetts. It's so strange. It's called the Scots Charitable Society. If you haven't noticed, I haven't heard of that ever. Take a look. It's pretty interesting. They're now worth 1.79 million, pretty wild. Anyways, the thing is that we have created an industry that are really, really good at competing with each other. Competition is our mindset. And in many of our boardrooms, and it's certainly the mindset in operations, where we focus on showing how our nonprofit is different, unique, better. We made more impact. We have more people who have more experience. We have more resources, and therefore, we are more worthy of your investment. In the natural world, competition is when organisms interact, and either the organism or the species is harmed. In our world, when an intelligent organism witnesses or experiences harm, trust is lost. So if our first instinct is to fight the competition and our mindset is mistrust, then the mere mention of the word, dare I say it, which really is a cooperative coming together word, it just goes against our natural instincts that have been cultivated for hundreds of years. I know that saying the M word can signal visions of negative experiences, and I commend you all for still being here and being accepting of this. Some of you may have actually been involved with mergers within your organizations. But I can tell you, having worked with nonprofits for over 15 years, and my father, who founded this company, worked with nonprofits for over 40 years, for most, being approached about an opportunity to merge, one starts with high skepticism, an immediate instinct to hoard our resources, because that's what we've been trained to do to win. One of the purposes of this topic in your Nonprofit Net series is to consider partnerships and merger as one way to build capacity. Competition and trust play an important part in nonprofit mergers, as does time. So you may be aware of the documented life cycle of most nonprofit organizations. They start with an idea, a purpose, a cause, a need for a solution. And some grow quickly from there to be mature organizations and eventually reach what we call the sustain phase, where organizations can spend 5 to 30 years in a complacent mode, not a negative word, rather meant to describe regular ongoing work. It relates to the fact that NPOs rarely actually achieve their full mission goal and put themselves out of work. In this phase, work on the mission occurs and the nonprofit continues to find funding. And at some point during that stage, nonprofits either experience or cause to experience a turnaround event. The turnaround event effectively puts the nonprofit back at some stage of the sustaining phase or all the way back to the maturing phase and enables a cycle that sustains the organization for many years, like the 135 years of the United Way. If a turnaround event does not occur, then most organizations begin to decline, a phase that can last 1 to 10 years or even more. And it usually ends in some sort of dissolution. Decline is not a good option because, as we all are well aware, nonprofits have valuable IP, and we play a critical role in society, from medicine to education to community development and more. So turnaround effects nonprofits differently based on their organization size and the impact of the event. Usually a turnaround event is associated with money inflow or a new service or work opportunity that needs to be delivered, or new attention that needs more money and new services. Some examples of turnaround events include new drug releases, like those in 2023 for cystic fibrosis that directly affected some health-based nonprofits. Disasters such as the California fires, they directly affect health and human services nonprofits. Or geopolitical tragedies like the war in Ukraine, attacks in Israel and Gaza. A political policy change like the many executive orders that are creating confusion and uncertainty about funding and compliance. But there's also some amazing policy changes that have literally been the start of a nonprofit organization. And then there's major cash inflows like the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge or Mackenzie Scott's recent gifts. Sometimes these turnarounds are minor and operational, and typically the turnaround is a mini cycle then in the sustaining change. Other times, turnarounds are major and structural, and then the nonprofit resets itself to the maturing stage. Keeping your nonprofit thriving is actually probably what keeps you up at night, if that's your role in the nonprofit. And while there are several ways to affect a turnaround event, the main goal is to achieve a step change to restart the life cycle as far back as possible. A restart of that scale typically requires a structural change that supports your organization's ability to increase your capacity. To make significantly more impact, you have two major options. One is to build that capacity from scratch, which has been achieved by organizations taking several years of investment in their own infrastructure, such as the American Kidney Foundation. It grew stepwise after a new federal law in 1996, I realize this is a while ago, but this is pretty cool actually, made it illegal for medical providers to assist low-income patients by subsidizing dialysis expenses that Medicare didn't cover. So AKF filled that need and sought to financially support the growth in services. They grew revenue 37% over 8 years. Alternatively, you can acquire it. Acquiring capacity is best achieved by merging organizations, and this process can take place over a matter of months or a few years. As one example, the Alzheimer's Association merged in 2016. They grew 50%, 50, in just 4 years. It's a pretty big number, actually. They went from 181 million in 2015 to 378 million in 2019. Although these numbers are super interesting and they give us a little bit of context, we all know that they really don't tell the whole story. They are also the extremes of that. Generally in my work, I see much different numbers. But our mission, impact, and success is really only made possible by the people. One of the reasons competition and trust are major components of our organizations is become more than widgets or even what I would call productized services. Some people, really all people, are the heartbeat of our organizations. And I hope this actually brings a smile or feeling of joy because you know how special and important the people who work for you or with you are to the work you do in the community, the relationships you form, and your brand. The people build trust internally and externally, and the people are a major competitive differentiator. So let's insert some context of scale. Some of you may know this. Nonprofits employ 12.8 million people, 1 in every 10 jobs. Does anybody know what's ranking the industry of nonprofit is in the numbers of employers? I can't see everybody, but let's raise our hand. Do people think that we're the #1 employer? I can't see. I don't think anybody. Number 2? Anybody? A couple of people think number 2. Number 3? Does anyone think we're number 3? I can't see everybody. Raise your hands. One more time. Number 4. Interesting. We are the 3rd largest employer of any sector. It's really cool. In Massachusetts alone, we employ over 550,000 people. It's over 17% of the state's private sector workforce. Pretty cool stuff, actually, with regards to our people and what we're doing. The figures that I just laid out confirm that people are the business of nonprofits. People are not commodities, and therefore they are not traded or negotiated generally, mostly, in nonprofit mergers. In fact, the 2 seminal questions that begin all merger considerations are about what people can do. All right, first, we start this process of thinking about what we're looking for and what we're considering if formal partnering with another organization is going to enable us to do more for our mission. So we ask these questions. Does a potential partner have something we want? Does a potential partner have something that works that would take us too long or be too expensive to build? Think back to that example of the American Kidney Foundation. Although cool, it was a lot. We, or maybe others, are about to do something really, really cool, but it's going to segment the field or produce a lot more competition in our area, which may not ultimately benefit our ultimate mission. Is our physical footprint too small? Do we have a live-work overlap with ourselves or with another organization? And finally, ask yourself, do we have something that others would benefit from? And really answering those questions requires a pretty deep dive. And you might think about a strategy session and whatnot, but this is really preparing yourself to have a conversation with another organization. So understand your current state, understand the trends, understand what you do that is core and critical to your mission, that if you stop doing it, your mission literally would not be able to be met. And then after you're done doing that internal kind of work, we're ready for our two seminal questions. So I often get asked, how do I start with a merger discussion? Well, starting with these two questions sets up a future conversation that's about building capacity and doing more with people at the core. These two questions point the discussion away from hoarding or competing and prompt creative ideation. It sets up an opportunity for two or more organizations who might, on a daily basis, compete in some way to sit on the same side of the table. On the other side of the table are the challenges to achieving mission outcomes. What can we do better together? So, why would a peer agree to sit with you and explore these questions? Well, one reason is because nonprofit leaders are facing very similar pressures. So we start with commonality. So let's look at some current known and unknown internal and external pressures that require organizations to innovate, acquire more resources, or have more capacity to achieve some or full relief. These are not going to be new to you. You're probably experiencing them now or have heard of them. But the fact is, with economics, every single organization is being affected by the financial instability right now. Matter of fact, 46% of nonprofits lack sufficient funds to deliver programs. Most of my statistics are coming from a combination of Stanford Social Innovation Review, National Nonprofit Review, as well as others. And if you want my stats, the specific things, I can give them to you. Individual donations fell by 3.4% in 2023, continuing a multi-year decline. Donor retention dropped by 2.5 in 2023. I'm stating 2023 and 2023 facts because that's mostly where we have this data. We know that competition for grants are intensifying, those that are left. And this is really scary. 22% of nonprofits are scaling back our fundraisers simply because we're worried about even being able to put them on and the return on investment that's going to yield. Let's now talk about the workforce. You guys probably already know this, but more than half of nonprofits are identifying staffing as their top challenges. We've got shortages with more than half the organizations, and we've got organizations that are struggling to recruit senior leaders. I know some of the people on this call today, actually, this is your business, and so you know this very, very well. We also have a problem with mentor programs in the area, so that's tough. And yet the world needs us, right? Governments are continuing to apply this outsourcing model where they're relying heavily on nonprofits to solve community problems. 77% of nonprofits, $1 million and up, saw an increase in demand for services in 2024. 77%. We are always being asked to do more, always, always, always with less. The pressure is actually exacerbated by the pandemic recovery gaps still existing. Going back to the people thing, nonprofit employment is 1.4% below 2019 levels, even though it's growing. And community needs have escalated tremendously since the pandemic. Finally, let's talk about tech. So most of us, this is really kind of a scary thing. I've gone into work with organizations who are literally still doing stuff, dare I say this, on paper, but it happens, right? Many of us are using legacy systems that are lacking real-time performance data. 90% of all nonprofit organizations rely on 3 or more disconnected software systems because software is expensive. It's really hard to not only implement it, get it to work for you, but also have it go through the training and have staff available to work on it. But this requires us to do a lot of manual reporting, and it then takes more time for us to have information to have good agile decision making. There's also industry trends. So while those are pressures on our organization, there are also trends. These change all the time. I would say probably even yearly. Sometimes they last a couple of years. But regardless of what the current trends are, they are cause for concern and anxiety in your shop and everybody else's shop too. Here are just some for 2025 and 26. Again, these should be very, very familiar to you. We just talked about digital transformation. Let's start with AI, right? While 65% of nonprofits are actually using AI for donor behavior analysis, we're still really concerned about the ethics. How does this data get worked? How can we have transparency with our data? And then building our financial armor, talking about that instability there, times are uncertain. And while we are really, really good at diversifying our revenue, I know that's something we always talk about and have for decades. The fact is, regular diversification isn't really optional anymore. It's kind of existential. This was a scary fact I came along by looking at what was happening with grants. I was having a number of organizations struggling with their grants and getting paid for their grants. Half of grant-funded NPOs face payment delays exceeding 6 months in 2024 alone. Pretty crazy, but nonetheless, here we are still trying to do that thing. We all know AI is helping with this a little bit, but nonetheless, the end of one size fits all philanthropy doesn't exist. Pretty cool. 65% of Gen Z donors abandon organizations that fail to personalize communications. 51% of Gen Z donors give via influencer curated campaigns. That costs money. And then finally, we were talking about staffing before. It's still a trend, obviously. It's been a trend for a long time. But we are still at this moment where a majority, 41%, well, not a majority, just under majority of executives plan to retire by 2026. And a majority, over 50% of our organizations admit that they don't have a succession plan. All this to say, your pressures and trends are the pressures and trends of your nonprofit industry peers. And those common enemies, dare we say, can bring you together. So we were asked a little bit earlier, you're going to be sharing the slides. One of the reasons that these slides aren't totally available is because I took this image off the internet. I didn't pay for it. And I know that that's illegal, but it's just for us chickens. So that's why you have it. But nonetheless, we as an industry and our peers are expected to be prepared for economic and environmental disasters. We've got to survive a cyber attack. We've got to make money rain. We've got to be as quick and nimble as an online influencer while having the stability and trust of a good friend. So we're supposed to be everything, everywhere, all at once. And it's a really tall order. So as nonprofits look at ways to sustain, survive, and thrive, they're going to benefit by recognizing what our for-profit counterparts have adopted as best practices. We can't afford the luxury of operating in a silo. It is too expensive to own everything. More people and more resources applied to a problem results in greater impact more quickly. A reduction in competition provides greater concentration of our highly engaged constituents. In other words, to achieve sustainability, organizations are going to benefit by exploring mergers. There is no harm in starting a discussion about merging. There's no risk in exploring the possibilities of what 2 or more organizations can do to serve their missions. Nothing happens unless you decide you want it to, and sometimes even before our boards vote. It's as simple as starting a conversation about what we could do better together. So the McCormick Group follows a merger consideration process with the philosophy that we are not negotiating. We are designing a new combined organization, and the goal is to carefully and respectfully gain clarity on a future view. And here are the steps that we generally take. We get everybody in a room. We take time to build trust. We listen for what's needed. We discuss the mission first, not the money. We capture our agreements, we design a structure if we want, and if we're going to keep on going, we meet our technical requirements. You're going to notice that trust and time appear here together. When we get excited about opportunities, there's often a desire to move really quickly. I'm working with 2 organizations right now, and they're like, yeah, we want to merge, by the end of the month. I'm just like, oh my gosh. We found that this is a really, really critical step, trust and time. The pace varies based on the situations. So it may seem easy to be like, okay, let's do this. You've got something, we've got something. Let's get in a room. Let's make this happen. But in the context of discussions among volunteers, our board leaders, and when wants, what one might want versus what another don't fully align, saying what you want becomes actually really nuanced. And it's much better to focus on what we all want to build, not what we want to preserve. The reality is, change moves at the speed of trust, and trust takes time to build. So in order to gain that clarity, starting with the listening for possibilities and needs part of the process, we explore questions like these at the 30,000-foot view first, and then we kind of drive down and detail it if we need to. So we're going to share information about what each other is doing, including what our superpower is, what we're special at. Those things that I told you to prepare for before you even walked in the room, you're ready to talk about them now. So through this process, we gain start and we try to build some sort of case for collaboration that supports our mission impact. Sometimes the answer is, yeah, we don't have anything here. And that's okay too. You still learn about each other. You still have learned more about yourself to begin this journey. So we ask what it could look like, how it's going to function, what are the benefits, what would be different, what would be the same. And then we kind of get into some more detailed topics like governance, finances, operations, or more. You can expect that barriers and opportunities are going to emerge. So it's a really good idea as you're heading into this for you and your peers who are part of the process to have a startup mentality. It really is. If the paper was blank, how would we design it today? And then apply your resources to that problem. So who takes the lead? I often get asked, all right, how does this happen? Well, sure, it has happened, and I've been aware and been part of projects where a stakeholder, a donor, is one saying, hey, get your shop in order, or I will do this if you guys can kind of come together. That does happen, and that's okay. More oftentimes than not, it is the board member, like a board chair, or an executive director or CEO. Later, we're going to involve more board members and more staff if we decide we want to do it. But initially, it's a pretty small circle, because when we start to involve people, a number of things start to pop up, which are normal and great and just need to be acknowledged. One is passion. So think about your supporters currently, your board members, and even the people running your organization. We are supporters. We believe in the mission. We're here for it. So that sometimes shows itself in a very, very, very deep ways. We also get lots of questions. And while questions are great, when you're not prepared to answer them, not having the answer at certain times can sometimes be a detriment to even having the conversation to begin with. We also get some anxiety. What am I going to lose? And that's why we start with, what do we have to gain, before we realize that we need maybe to have a discussion about what needs to give. So as an executive director or a board chair, it is your role to alleviate those fears, to talk about how that there's a lot of options and we're just talking. It's also important to keep your eye on the prize, your mission, and keeping the protection around that handful of core things that if you didn't do them, your mission wouldn't be valid. And finally, we kind of have to manage the distractions. There's a lot. You have a lot to do. No one actually has time for one extra project, as you probably all well know. So how do we manage those distractions and make it through this process so that we can learn a little bit more? So many nonprofits have merged, some probably here even on the screen today, and even more have considered merging over time. And while the benefits are dependent on a number of factors, including the end structure, the support of the merger by the staff, volunteers, and ultimately the community. And quite honestly, in order to make a merger work, you've got to have some dedicated belief and hard work on specific outcomes. There are a few things among all of those that most organizations have documented gaining 1 to 2 years past merger. Some of these expected gains are answers to the pressures and trends by design. During the exploration phase, we learn what the impediments are to a success, And then together, we design a solution with more resources and intelligence, more capacity to alleviate those pressures. A few gains that might not be so obvious on this list, but are really incredibly valuable, are staff specialization and attracting new board members. Earlier, I mentioned the role people play in our organizations. And as we grow in size, we're better able to provide opportunities for people to grow. They can be more specialized. So we're not doing all the things for all the reasons. So we can work in cross-functional teams. We can creatively solve challenges. Your organization, when it's combined, has a bigger collective mind and heart, along with more hands. And although it's typical for some staff turnover to occur during merger for a variety of reasons, staff generally are brought forward to merging organizations because we still have the same amount of work to do the day before as the day after. What it really allows is for organizations to allow for growth and to figure out how we can better apply people's talents to our problems. The other thing is think about the numbers and the scale. If you combine two or more organizations together, you have large assets, and generally larger assets attract board members who have more potential to give or connect the organization with wealth. Some nonprofits has actually seen really, really huge gains quickly with new board members after mergers. So while nonprofit mergers lag behind for-profit mergers almost always due to cultural, governance, and brand integration challenges, 48% of nonprofit organizations, according to a recent survey by the Lilly Foundation, are planning to implement a strategic partnership or a merger this year, 2025. Nonprofit mergers are becoming more frequent, strategic, and sector-driven. Organizations are increasingly viewing mergers as a proactive tool for sustainability and mission growth rather than as measures of last resort. And I know probably many of you on this call have heard or seen or read stories about dissolution, handing over the keys. I just can't do this anymore, right? This trend is really expected to continue as nonprofits seek greater efficiency and resilience. The sooner you realize you need that and open up the door to a possibility of exploring a merger, the stronger you will be. Unfortunately, some merger discussions end before they even finish exploring possibilities. There's a number of reasons they fail. Some of them are for good reasons, and some of them are because that generally individuals, whether it's staff or board members or some other party, fail to focus on the overall goal of increasing mission impact. They get stuck on safeguarding that hoarding for their own personal or institutional status. There are a few keys that are prevalent in successful merger discussions. I've experienced them personally. It's also been documented by other organizations and my peers in this field. And these are what they are. It requires a champion. You can be it, or you can cultivate one, but someone in your organization who can build trust, is trustworthy, and believes in the potential opportunities. Communications are key. What you say, when, to whom can directly affect people's perceptions and understanding of this process. Remember, I talked to you about who we talk to and who gets involved when. What you say and who those people are directly affects the success of any communication plan. At the end of the day, whether an organization, two or more organizations choose to partner in a formal way or not, the communications is what's going to keep you healthy partners. Taking time is important, but you don't want to take too much time. My recommendation is to keep a memorable pace. So let's remember what we talked about. Let's remember what we're trying to build, but not try to push it too quickly. A neutral party is a good idea, not just because this is what I do. It's been proven over and over again. You got to have someone in the room who doesn't have a stake in the game. And finally, that hoarding, protecting mindset is so natural. It's normal. It's okay. But it comes into play actually because people feel vulnerable. So when you take the time early on in that process that I said, get yourself ready to have these conversations and you clarify your superpower, what makes your organization really relevant, you share that, you protect that, you have confidence in articulating what that is. That's the essence of your organization. Then you can focus on building a new organization, that vision we talked about, with components that might be a little bit more flexible. Ultimately, our work is to plant a tree under whose branches we may never sit, but whose shade will benefit future generations. Taking time to consider collaboration is worthwhile, it's risk averse, and it's a great way to make sure you have the right seed and soil to grow your mission. All right, that's all I had. So I'll get out of my screen share and take some questions. Hopefully that was helpful.
I have a question, and thank you for this great presentation. My question is, if we're not considering a merger, but a collaboration that allows other organizations to reach for more groups. So one example I can think of, it's, for example, financial literacy. And instead of having a merger with a credit union or a bank, how can you formalize those type of partnerships so it's more ingrained into the work that they do, but with the focus that we have, rather than having two nonprofits come together and merge?
Right. So I didn't put it up here. Let me see if I've got it in this deck. I don't have it in this deck. So there is a whole continuum of ways that nonprofit organizations or nonprofit and for-profit organizations can collaborate and partner. I didn't go into that today, but you're absolutely right. It starts way on one side of having kind of just an MOU, which you all probably have done. Let's share something, right? Let's put that kind of thing together, which is fine. In my personal experience, it doesn't stick, and it's a tiptoe, which is sometimes necessary, but sometimes doesn't actually get the result you're looking for. What you're talking about is what I would describe kind of in that middle phase, where we share a service or we share an ultimate goal, and structuring that is kind of the work that I do. Let's talk about what we're actually trying to achieve. And so I'd like to get folks in a room to talk about what we're actually trying to achieve first, and then what structure is needed. Do we need shared governance? Do we just need an operational model? How do we actually achieve the thing that we're doing? And so you absolutely can. And many of the discussions that I try to take all the way to the nth degree of, hey, let's consider if we did nothing, what it's going to look like. If we went all the way in and merged, what it's going to look like. And sometimes the answer, absolutely, Diego, is somewhere in the middle. You can also, though, go in with somewhere in the middle. Sometimes people don't like to come to the table unless we're not even going to mention the M word, right? So to your point about your vision is some sort of collaboration that exists as a separate kind of program or separate kind of delivery is great. There's many ways to do that. I would say that the approach of still knowing what you want and coming together and talking about what you're trying to build is still very applicable to that. The results will just be a little bit different in terms of how it's papered at the end. Great question. Did that answer?
Yeah, I have another question, but I'll raise my hand again.
Okay.
Great. So there's a question by Runa. If you're able to, Runa, can you? turn on your camera?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So here's the thing. I'm in my car driving, and in my experience, it can be nerve-wracking to see someone on video while they're driving.
That's fine. Okay, just checking. Please ask your question.
No, thank you so much. This is so relevant to me. So just my question is, I am new to a board leadership position, and one of the very first things that I found myself tackling was an acquisition offer by another nonprofit. And so that was kind of me being dropped into the deep end of the pool. I had to kind of figure out how to assess the offer, how to think about it, etc. And the conclusion that our team came to was, while this specific offer was not the right offer for a variety of reasons, we actually probably do need to think about merging with someone for a variety of reasons. And so my question is, suppose we know we want to merge. Do you have any thoughts on how to find potential, or how to even think about potential merger partners?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'm laughing because I've been part of many situations where people receive kind of offer letters out of the blue. It is not my preferred way of doing it. I don't know of really anybody who's kind of accepted unless they're ready to hand over their keys and offer like that. And it's so funny because many of our board members live in the corporate world. And so their version of a merger is an acquisition, and an acquisition in the for-profit world is a lot different than a partnership in the nonprofit world. And so their general frame of mind comes from, well, let's just put an offer on the table, but you actually can't legally buy a nonprofit. So it's an interesting thing, but I see it all the time. So I'm sorry you had to go through that. But good job kind of assessing it. To answer your question, my recommendation for organizations, and I've worked with many who've gone through this process, so happy to help answer more later if you'd like, but you still need to do that first initial work of who are we? What do we need? What do we want? And what do we have? Once you get that together, then you can start looking around at that to answer that need question. And I generally have organizations start with mission alignment because it's easy that way. So you first start with mission alignment for the need you have. What organizations in your area have that mission alignment? If you also want to broaden it out, which is my recommendation, go a little bit wider, I do geographic proximity because of the network Diego was talking about. There are many organizations that do ish kind of stuff. And if we could just sort of think about, quite honestly, the mission of United Ways is to kind of bring that stuff together and then apply resources towards a specific mission. So that's another way you can do it. This is actually exactly what the McCormick Group does. I help people find dating partners. So happy to answer a little bit more of your detail, but in general, get yourself ready and then start looking for mission and geographically aligned organizations to answer that need question that you're going to define.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next, Leah, you've been patiently waiting.
Oh, happy to wait. Really appreciate all the other answers and questions. My question might be a tricky one, but I'm curious if you have words of wisdom or a suggested starting point best practice when people are very invested in the institutional identity and there is a sentiment of sort of not on our watch, and moving the shared leadership that's so common in nonprofits forward when not everyone's on the same page.
Yeah. Is it Leah or Lee?
Leah.
Leah. Yes, Leah. Oh, welcome to my world. I feel your pain through the screen. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Yes is the short answer. It happens all the time. You're not a unique butterfly. Particularly with founders and founder organizations, that happens. So there are a couple of things that I have found to be successful that you may want to consider. First of all is mapping out of the individuals that exist, what are their characteristics and what are their big needs and desires, and having small conversations where there's no pressure, where we take, kind of that to that one slide that I had in terms of anxiety and passion and all that. It's all of those kinds of things that you need to manage, whether you find people to talk to them offline. I generally suggest doing it over food, preferably wine, having really deep conversations about what it is that they're worried about without coming out and saying, well, what is it you're worried about? So really having careful conversations about what we need to do to protect. The other thing is, as I mentioned before, when you say the word merger or collaboration or partnership, unless your organization has defined partnership in a certain other way, the first thing people do, like I mentioned, is to kind of, how do I protect? Not on my watch. I've got to protect it. So if we change the narrative, so we think a little bit more about what can we build? What if you were a startup? What if you took all the things you had right now, just you, nobody else, in your organization and blank slated it? Would you design it the same way? There are 15-year-olds making nonprofits in their garages right now to get into Harvard. So what would you do? You know what I mean? And I generally back off the what it's going to look like and how we're going to get there and what are we going to give and get and what would you build? And if you can find commonality, and I call it the steak and the sizzle, then you can figure out what kind of steak you actually want to grill. Is that helpful? This is really hard stuff. I don't mean to belittle that, actually. And I know my comments probably aren't full, but yeah.
Yeah, I have
Diego,
another
you have another question?
Yes, thank you. So my question is the following. How would you approach a merger to a college or university when you did an assessment analysis and you started to see their vision and they want to become a Latino serving institution in our case, and we're Latinx center, how do you make that initial conversation to the school or the university in this case to get that alignment and start having that merger conversation, or get to the merger conversation, but it's just like, what are the beginning stages of getting that dating stage per se?
Yep. Good question. So the first part is to do your homework. Don't get down this path. I know you did your homework, and am I glitching, or is that just me? Hopefully I'm not glitching. Anyway, so hopefully you did the research in terms of finding that organization, but you still need to do your internal research because there's going to be barriers, and the barriers come quick. Because I said the first thing we do as nonprofit organizations is put up a barrier because we're used to competing. So just make sure that you're really solid organizationally yourself. But generally, the very, very first step that I have organizations take is for a peer to contact a peer. And so if you know somebody that's at your exact same level or appropriate level based on the organization's size, then you literally can pick up the phone and say, hey, I've been thinking about the landscape. Go back to those common trends, the common pressures, lead with those statements and say, maybe we can get together and talk about this. Don't say, I want to collaborate. Don't say we've got something you want. Like back off, fine. Start with what you're very, very, very common and you have that similarity. That's why I like peer-to-peer. If the peer-to-peer is a board member on your board and somebody at a similar level at the institution, then start there. It's just coffee or wine, whatever, right? And you should really just get the cut of their jib. Like, what are you thinking? What are you worried about? What are you concerned about? Tell me what your biggest pressures are right now, because you're going to have some that overlap, and start with that commonality. Once you get a couple of those down and you have a couple of those meetings, the whole purpose, by the way, of any one of those meetings is, this has been great. Can we meet again? Can we meet again? Can we meet again? Can we meet again? You keep doing that until there's a reason to not meet again, which is a hard thing, because especially if you do it in person, it's hard for people to say no to that, right? Which, by the way, don't do this over Zoom. Show up, go have the wine. I'm literally telling you to go drink wine. I should probably, can we take that out, Dora?
I'll do
so
some video editing.
yeah, video editing, take that part out, nonetheless. So you see what I'm saying? So you're really think about it as cultivating a relationship like you would a donor first, not the ask of money, but the other part. And then there will be a time when you'll start to realize there's some there's enough commonality, there's enough kind of agreement in the trajectory that you're going to be like, ooh, I think we should sit down together. So the very next step, when you reach that point, which could be 1 meeting or 3 meetings, could be a month, it could be a year, depending on what your needs are to get a few more people in the room. And this is where I was talking about the people, right? Generally, my first recommendation is a volunteer and an executive. So for instance, your board chair and yourself, and their board chair and themselves, unless that organization is tons bigger than you financially. And then we kind of need to peer it, right? Peer matters a lot in these discussions. So the next thing would be to say, hey, I think it might be good for us to continue to kind of explore what we can do better for the Latino community here. Maybe we should get our volunteers together and just have a quick chat. Let's just explore what's possible. That's it. Answer the question. What can we do better together? There's no harm in that, and they're likely not going to say no. If they say no, you better call me. But I can also help you make sure they say yes, but definitely do that. You should do that. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great. Next, Samantha, you have a question.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. It has been really interesting, really helpful. I guess my question is around, you identified that there's times when things get stuck, right? And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts and suggestions about if things are stuck, is it, and to step away and come back. And I'm curious if you are, have any recommendations around, when's the right time to come back to have these conversations again?
Yeah. So there's a lot of nuance there that I would probably need to know to give you an exact example. So I'm happy to follow up if you want. But in general, if you've walked down a path of a formal partnership, sharing something more than an MOU, than paper, let's call it, right? And you're stuck for whatever reasons. My experience is generally it takes a leadership change on both sides of, if there's 2 organizations, in order to work. sometimes a leadership change only on one side will do it. But generally you've gone through enough, I will call it brain damage, but you know what I mean, pains, things brought up, uncomfortableness, et cetera. And that now we're in that fight or flight mode. So you're just going to have to fly a little bit and go back. And then something's going to have to change before you come back. That doesn't mean that you can't have further discussions with another partner, but to have those exact same discussions with that exact same partner, if you can do it, good on you. I've never seen it happen without a leadership change.
Great. We have 5 more minutes, probably enough for one more question. This is your chance, folks. If not, great. I just want to thank you, Kim, for fantastic presentation, really insightful on what it takes to form a successful nonprofit collaborations. And before you go, just a quick reminder, we value your feedback, and there's a survey when you log out, very helpful. And if you're able to appreciate a contribution, consider a gift of $10 to $20 to keep our programming free. This is the last webinar of our spring series. Be sure to check our website, emails, and social media for program updates for our fall series and other news. And our best wishes to everyone. Summer is coming. It doesn't feel like it, but I'm told it's coming. Just may take a little while longer. Take care, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Take care.